So they're calling me a monster, a homewrecker. Yeah, I hear the whispers. That I blew up a 27-year marriage, tore a family apart, and danced on the wreckage without a single regret. They think I should be ashamed, right? Down on my knees, begging for forgiveness because he caught me. With my much younger coworker. Let them talk. The truth? Yeah, he caught me. But this whole mess? It's his fault. Always has been, always will be. And sorry? Not even a little bit. You want to know why? Get comfortable. 27 years. Just think about that. Almost 3 decades. We had the house, the 2 kids, grown, thank God, so they were spared some of that particular drama. And that shared history everyone seems to envy. Or at least pretends to. On the outside, we were Theo and Willow. You know, that couple. The ones who weathered all the storms and supposedly came out stronger still holding hands. What a beautifully crafted lie. Our wedding photos? They show this young, hopeful couple. And I guess I was. Hopeful. I actually bought into the dream he was selling. A life of partnership. Being cherished. Being, well, seen. Theo was charming back then, you can't deny it. He knew all the right things to say, how to pull off the grand gestures when it mattered, especially when people were watching. The proposal? Super public. Big spectacle at his parents' anniversary dinner. Roses. A violinist he hired. The whole 9 yards. Everyone gushed. How could I not get swept off my feet? Those early years. They were okay. As okay as any marriage is when you're drowning in mortgage payments, building a life, and trying to figure out who you are while you're tied to someone else. We had our moments, I'm not going to lie. Sunny vacations, Christmases that felt genuinely warm. But even then, looking back, there was always this undercurrent, this expectation from him that I'd be the quiet, supportive wife, the one whose needs always came second, or third, or just not at all. My ambitions? Oh, those were just cute hobbies to him. My desires? Afterthoughts, if that. He was a good provider, I'll give him that. People always trot that one out, don't they? Oh, but he was such a good provider. As if putting food on the table and a roof over our heads is the gold standard for emotional fulfillment. As if that excuses everything else. Sure, he provided things. But what about attention? Adoration? What about that look from your partner that makes you feel like you're the only woman in the world? That died a slow, agonizing death. Or maybe it was never really there to begin with. Maybe I just conjured it up in that naive glow of youth. The kids arrived, and I poured every ounce of myself into them. It was easier then to ignore the growing chasm between Theo and me. Motherhood's an all-consuming job, a very convenient distraction. He was busy with his career, climbing that ladder, providing, always providing. And I was busy with school runs, scraped knees, and the never-ending, thankless job of keeping a household from falling apart. We were a team, sure, but playing totally different sports, on entirely different fields. Those shared glances, they became rarer. Conversations, purely functional. How was your day? Fine. The end, for years. You don't just wake up one morning and decide to detonate your life. It's not like flipping a switch. It's more like a slow erosion, a dripping tap that, over time, wears away solid stone. For me, it was the neglect. Not the kind of loud, headline-grabbing abuse. No, Theo was never physically cruel. His cruelty was quieter, much more insidious. It was soul-crushing neglect. Do you have any idea what it's like to feel invisible in your own home? To talk and your words just vanish into thin air, completely unheard. To ache for a touch, a simple, non-transactional touch, and get nothing but a polite nod from the other side of the dinner table? He'd come home, grunt a hello, grab a beer, and then plant himself in front of the TV. Sports, news, anything but me. I swear I could have worn a clown suit, set my hair on fire, and I doubt he would have noticed until the smoke alarm started screaming. I tried. God, I really tried. In the early days of, let's call it the great emotional drought, I made an effort. I'd suggest date nights. Oh, I'm too tired, Willow. Big project at work. I'd buy new lingerie. He wouldn't even look up from his laptop. Nice, honey, he'd mumble, eyes still glued to the screen. And it wasn't just about sex, though that had shriveled down to a twice-a-year perfunctory event that left me feeling more hollow than satisfied. It was about intimacy, connection, feeling desired. He stopped complimenting me. Years just went by. I'd get a new haircut, buy a new dress, and nothing, not a flicker of interest. It was like I was just part of the furniture, reliable, always there, and utterly, completely unexciting. He'd remember our anniversary, usually with a card and some flowers his secretary probably picked out. But the romance, the passion, dead, buried, and he was the one shoveling the dirt on the coffin. I remember this one time so clearly. It was our 20th anniversary. I'd booked a table at that little Italian place where he proposed. I spent hours getting ready. I actually felt hopeful for a change. He was late, an hour late. Walked in, didn't even really apologize. Sorry, got held up. He spent the entire dinner checking his phone for work emails. I might as well have been dining with a stranger. A rude one at that. That night, something inside me just snapped. Not in a loud way, just a quiet internal crack. The realization hit me. I was utterly, completely alone in this marriage. He'd say I was being dramatic if he heard all this. We had a comfortable life, Willow. What more did you want? And that's the thing, isn't it? He couldn't grasp wanting more than just comfort. He couldn't understand that a woman needs to feel cherished, adored, desired, not just put up with. His lack of adoration wasn't just an oversight, it was a constant, grinding dismissal of my worth as a woman, as his wife. He made me feel like a ghost in my own life. And ghosts, well, sometimes they decide to go haunt somewhere else, or find someone who can actually see them. The kids grew up and moved out. The silence in the house became this tangible thing, a heavy blanket smothering any tiny spark that might have been left. His excuses for not engaging with me just got more ingrained, his disinterest a permanent fixture. It wasn't active malice, not really. It was worse. It was indifference. He just didn't care enough to even try. He was content in his little world, and he just assumed I was too. Boy, was he wrong. He built the walls between us, brick by painstaking brick of neglect, and then acted all surprised when I found a way to climb over them. Then Jack showed up. Jack. Just saying his name feels different. He started at my company, different department, but our paths crossed at some mind-numbingly dull inter-office seminar. I was, 48 by then? He was 28. Yeah, I know. The cliché. The older, neglected wife and the younger, attentive man. Judge all you want. I don't care. You weren't there. You didn't feel the slow starvation I'd been living with for over a decade. Jack was alive. He had this incredible energy. And he actually saw me. When I spoke up in that seminar, offered a suggestion, he didn't just give a polite nod. He engaged. He asked follow-up questions. He looked me right in the eyes. And when I looked back, I saw interest, genuine interest. It was like a sip of water after crawling through a desert for years. We started talking, totally innocent at first. Coffee in the break room, complaining about management together. He was funny, quick-witted, and he listened. I mean, actually listened. He'd ask about my day and seem genuinely interested in the answer. He'd remember little things I'd mentioned offhand, a favorite book, a type of music I liked. Theo hadn't done that well, ever, if I'm being brutally honest. Jack noticed my new haircut. "Willow, that color is fantastic on you. It really brings out your eyes." Simple words, right? But they hit me like a bombshell. Someone noticed. Someone appreciated it. He'd compliment my ideas in meetings, tell me I was smart. He made me feel visible again, not as Theo's wife, not as someone's mother, but as Willow, a woman, a desirable woman. He was a breath of fresh air in the stale, suffocating prison my life had become. He made me laugh again, a real, genuine belly laugh, not that polite little titter I'd perfected over the years. With him, I felt younger, more vibrant. He wasn't just attentive, he was adoring, in small ways at first. The way he'd look at me for just a second too long. The way he'd find tiny excuses to brush his hand against mine. It was intoxicating. Was I looking for it? Maybe. Subconsciously. Maybe I was so starved for any kind of positive attention that I was just ripe for the picking. And Jack, well, he knew how to pick his fruit. He saw the loneliness in my eyes, that quiet desperation I tried so hard to hide. And instead of judging it or ignoring it like Theo always did, he leaned into it. He offered me a lifeline. Or at least, that's what it felt like. Theo, meanwhile, was completely oblivious, utterly, blissfully ignorant. Or maybe just willfully blind. I'd come home from work feeling a bit lighter, a bit more alive after a conversation with Jack. And Theo wouldn't notice a single thing. Still the same grunt, the same beer, the same damn television screen. The contrast was glaring. On one side, a man who made me feel like the most fascinating woman in the world. On the other, a man who barely registered my presence. Which one do you think I was going to lean towards? It's not rocket science, it's basic human nature. His neglect created a vacuum, and Jack, with his youth and his charm and his open admiration, was more than happy to step in and fill it. It wasn't some sudden dive into a sordid affair. It was more like a gradual slide, a series of small concessions and shared moments that just built this undeniable momentum. Lunch dates became more frequent. The conversations got more personal, more intimate. We'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. He'd tell me about his dreams, his fears. I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone, and certainly not Theo, in years. The flirting became more obvious, lingering touches, suggestive comments. The electricity between us was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And I just soaked it all in. For the first time in so long, I felt desired. Truly, intensely desired. It was a drug, and I was an addict who'd been deprived for way too long. The first kiss. It happened after a late work event. We'd shared a cab. The air was just thick with unspoken things. When he leaned in, I didn't pull away. I couldn't. It was like every cell in my body was screaming for it, and when our lips met, it wasn't just a kiss. It was a validation, a confirmation that I was still alive, still capable of passion, still worthy of being wanted. From there, things escalated pretty quickly. Stolen moments in empty conference rooms, late nights disguised as working late, weekends where I'd have to concoct these elaborate excuses to see him. Was it reckless? Of course it was. Did I feel guilty? In fleeting moments, maybe a twinge. But it was quickly drowned out by the sheer intoxicating joy of feeling wanted, of feeling adored. Jack didn't just pay attention to me, he practically worshipped me. He told me I was beautiful, brilliant, funny. He made me feel like the woman I'd forgotten I could even be. He made me feel things Theo hadn't made me feel in 2 decades, if ever. It wasn't just physical, though God, the physical part was incandescent. He was young, energetic, eager to please. He explored my body like it was a new world, with a reverence and enthusiasm that literally left me breathless. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly, uninhibitedly sensual. He awakened a part of me that Theo had just let wither and die. And what was Theo doing while all this was going on? The same thing he always did. Working. Watching TV, existing in his own oblivious little bubble. If he noticed I was happier, more vibrant, he certainly didn't say anything. If he noticed I was working late way more often, he didn't question it. Why would he? In his mind, I was just Willow, reliable, predictable Willow. The thought that I might be capable of such a grand deception, such a passionate betrayal, probably never even crossed his mind. That's how little he knew me, how little he saw me. I wasn't just cheating on Theo. I was reclaiming a part of myself. I was choosing to feel alive over feeling numb. I was choosing passion over predictability. And Jack was the catalyst. He was the one who held up a mirror and showed me that I wasn't invisible, that I wasn't just some faded photograph from a forgotten album. He made me feel like the main character in my own life again. And honestly, it felt damn good. The guilt was a small price to pay for that feeling. A very small price. You play with fire, you're going to get burned. I knew that on some level. But Jack and we got careless. Or maybe subconsciously I wanted to get caught. Maybe I wanted Theo to finally see me, to see the consequences of his years of neglect. Maybe I wanted him to fight for me, to show some tiny spark of the passion he'd denied me for so long. A twisted fantasy, maybe. It happened on a Tuesday. Not even a special occasion, just a regular, boring Tuesday. Jack and I had gotten into this habit of meeting at a small, out-of-the-way hotel during our lunch breaks. Risky, I know, but the thrill was part of the allure. We were in that blissful, reckless phase where we felt totally untouchable. I'd told Theo I had a long lunch meeting with an important client, a flimsy excuse looking back. But he never questioned my work schedule. Why would he start now? We were busy. Let's just say the room was a testament to our mutual adoration. And in that moment, with Jack's arms around me, his lips on mine, I felt 1,000,000 miles away from my sterile marriage, from the silent dinners and the empty side of our bed. The door to the hotel room burst open, and there stood Theo, his face. I will never forget his face. It was this mask of disbelief, then confusion, then a dawning, gut-wrenching horror. His eyes, those eyes that had so often glazed over when looking at me, were wide, fixed, burning right into me. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he was truly seeing me. And what he saw was his wife, naked, in bed with another man, a younger man. Jack, to his credit, didn't panic. He just looked resigned. But my focus was all on Theo. The silence in that room was deafening, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the distant sound of traffic. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. He just stood there, his knuckles white as he gripped the door handle, all the color drained from his face, leaving him looking old, frail. Then he said my name, just my name. Willow? But the way he said it, it was like a shard of glass. It was the sound of a man whose entire world had just imploded. I didn't scramble for the sheets. I didn't try to hide. What was the point? The damage was done. The truth was out, in the most brutal way you can imagine. Part of me, a dark, twisted part, actually felt a strange sense of relief. The charade was finally over. He looked from me to Jack, then back to me. His expression hardened, a cold fury replacing the shock. "Get dressed," he said, his voice flat, completely devoid of emotion. It was more terrifying than if he'd raged. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the door ajar. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. Jack started to say something, but I just shook my head. There was nothing to say. The bomb had gone off. Now we just had to deal with the fallout. As I slowly got dressed, my hands shaking slightly, I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel regret. What I felt was this strange, cold clarity. This was it, the breaking point. And in a perverse way, it was a point I had been waiting for, a point he had driven us to. I remember thinking with a chilling detachment, well, he can't say he wasn't warned. Not in words, perhaps, but my unhappiness, my loneliness. It had been a screaming siren for years. He just chose not to hear it. Now, he couldn't ignore it any longer. He had caught me, and the game was well and truly over. The car ride home was silent. A heavy, suffocating silence that just pressed down on me. Theo drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. He didn't look at me. Not once. I just sat there staring out the window, watching the world go by as if it were any other day. But it wasn't. It was the day our life, as we knew it, ended. When we got back to the house that had been our home for over 2 decades, the dam finally broke. But it wasn't the explosion of rage I'd half expected, half hoped for. It was something worse. It was this quiet, devastating grief. He sat down at the kitchen table, the one where we'd shared thousands of meals, where the kids had done their homework, where life had unfolded in its mundane, everyday way, and he just crumbled. He put his head in his hands and sobbed, not loudly, but with these deep, racking sounds that seemed to tear right through him. I watched him, and I felt nothing. No, that's not entirely true. I felt a flicker of something. Annoyance? Impatience, maybe? He was crying. Now. He was showing emotion. Where was all this feeling for the last 10 years? Where was this passion when I was practically begging for his attention for just a scrap of affection? 27 years, Willow, he finally choked out, his voice raw. 27 years. How could you? And that's when my own dam broke, but not with tears, with anger, cold, hard anger that had been simmering for years and years. How could I shot back, my voice dangerously calm. How could you, Theo? How could you let me just wither away in this marriage? How could you ignore me, neglect me, make me feel like I was invisible for so damn long? He looked up, his face streaked with tears, his eyes full of a pain I recognized because I'd lived with its cousin, loneliness, for so long. I worked hard. I provided for us. I gave you a good life. There it was again, the provider speech. A good life? I scoffed. You call this a good life? Living like roommates? Barely speaking? Never touching? Is that your idea of a marriage, Theo? Because it's not mine. I didn't just cheat. I made sure you saw every text, every late-night call. I left my phone unlocked on purpose. If you were too blind to see it coming, that's on you. The argument that followed was ugly. All the unspoken resentments, all the years of frustration, just came pouring out. He accused me of destroying our family, of betraying our vows, of throwing everything away for some cheap thrill. He talked about the kids, how devastated they would be. He talked about his parents, our friends, the shame of it all. And I threw back at him every lonely night, every ignored gesture, every single moment I felt like a piece of unwanted furniture. I told him about Jack, about how he made me feel alive, desired, seen, things Theo hadn't done in an eternity. "He adores me, Theo," I remember shouting. "He actually looks at me like I matter. When was the last time you did that? Can you even remember?" He had no answer. Just more tears, more accusations of my cruelty. His mother called me in tears naturally. "How could you do this to him, Willow? To the family?" I actually laughed. "Why should I care about his mother's tears?" I told her. "You never called to ask if I was happy, did you? You never wondered why your son treated his wife like a domestic appliance." My sister, bless her naive heart, begged me to try counseling, as if a few awkward sessions with a stranger could magically undo decades of emotional starvation. The fallout was biblical. The kids were devastated, of course. They took his side, mostly. I was the villain, the Scarlet Woman. Our friends, those carefully cultivated couples we'd spent years having dinner parties with, most of them just melted away, siding with Theo, whispering about my scandalous behavior. Workplace gossip was probably insane. Jack and I became pariahs for a while. At Thanksgiving that year, the first one after, I went to my sister's. Theo was there with the kids. The tension was so thick, you could have spread it on a cracker. Everyone whispered. Theo's eyes were red, puffy. I made a point of smiling for every single family photo. Let them talk. Let them judge. Their opinions meant less than nothing to me. Theo moved out within a week. The divorce was surprisingly quick. Messy in its own way, sure. Dividing up assets, untangling two lives that had been intertwined for so long, but the emotional battle was already lost, or won, depending on how you look at it. He was broken, a shattered man. And me? People expect remorse. They demand it. Society has this neat little box for women like me. The repentant adulteress, head bowed in shame, begging for forgiveness. Well, I'm here to tell you I will not be squeezed into that box. I don't feel a single shred of remorse for what happened. Not for the affair, not for the end of my marriage, not for the so-called devastation I caused. Why should I? For 27 years, I played the part of the dutiful wife. I kept the home, raised the children, supported his career, and slowly, piece by piece, I let my own light dim just to accommodate his indifference. I gave him chances. I tried to communicate in my own ways that I was unhappy, that I needed more. He was either too arrogant, too self-absorbed, or just too damn oblivious to see it. He built that prison of neglect, and then he was shocked when I found the key and walked out. He watered the seeds of my discontent with his constant inattention, his lack of affection, his utter failure to cherish me. And then he cried foul when a different gardener came along and made my barren little patch bloom. Seriously? The affair with Jack? That wasn't the cause of our marriage ending. That was a symptom, a direct result of years of emotional starvation. Jack simply offered me what Theo had been withholding for decades: adoration, attention, passion. He made me feel like a woman again. Why on earth would I feel guilty for choosing to feel alive? Theo blames me entirely. Our kids, bless their brainwashed little hearts, blame me. Society, with its outdated, hypocritical moral codes, blames me. But I know the truth. It was his fault. His neglect was the hammer that shattered our marriage. My affair was just me picking up a few of the pieces and trying to build something new for myself. He didn't fight for me, not really. Even after he found out, his response was all grief and self-pity, not some passionate declaration that he couldn't live without me, that he'd do anything to win me back. No. It was all about how I had hurt him, how I had betrayed him. There was no introspection on his part, no acknowledgement whatsoever of his role in the decay of our relationship. Even in the throes of his heartbreak, it was still all about him. The devastation of the family? That's on him, too. A family is built on love, mutual respect, and emotional connection. He let those things wither and die. He was content with the facade, the empty shell of a marriage. I simply refused to live in that empty shell any longer. If the family shattered, it's because its foundations were rotten, and he was the one who let the rot set in. People say I destroyed my family. Maybe I did, but I feel lighter, freer than I have in decades. Their pain is not my problem. It's a consequence of his actions, his inactions. I refuse to carry the burden of his failures. He drove me to it. He made me seek solace and affirmation elsewhere because he refused to provide it within our marriage. He caught me with my coworker, yes, but he'd lost me long, long before that. He just hadn't bothered to notice. So, where am I now? I'm free. That's the simplest way to put it. The divorce is final. The dust has pretty much settled. Jack and I, well, that's another story for another day. Let's just say he served his purpose in reminding me what it felt like to be truly wanted. Whether that kind of intensity can last, or whether it was just a beautiful, necessary explosion, well, that remains to be seen. But I'm not pinning my happiness on him or any man ever again. What I learned from all this is that my happiness is my own damn responsibility. I spent far too many years waiting for Theo to make me happy, to validate me, to see me. And when he consistently failed, I finally took matters into my own hands. Maybe my methods were unconventional. Maybe they were destructive to that picture-perfect life we were supposed to have. But they were necessary for my survival, for my sanity. I hear things, of course. Whispers from former friends. Concerned calls from relatives who still think I've completely lost my mind. Theo apparently is still playing the victim. The poor, heartbroken husband. Good for him. Let him wear that crown of thorns if it brings him some kind of comfort. As for me, I'm rediscovering Willow. The woman who got lost somewhere in the middle of a 27-year marriage to a man who didn't appreciate her one bit. I'm traveling. I'm exploring new hobbies. I'm meeting new people who see me for who I am. Now, not who I was supposed to be. There's a lightness to my days that I haven't felt since I was a young woman, full of dreams, before the world. And Theo tried to tell me those dreams weren't important. Do I have any regrets? Absolutely not. Regret is a useless emotion. I made choices. I stood by them. And I'd make them again if I were faced with the exact same circumstances. If Theo was still the man he became, the man who let our love die from sheer neglect, then yes, I'd find my solace elsewhere again. Because I deserve to be happy. I deserve to be adored. And if the person who vowed to do that refuses, then I have every right to seek it from someone who will. To Theo, if he ever happens to see this, I have only one thing to say. You did this. You created the void. All I did was fill it. Maybe if you'd spent a little less time providing and a little more time adoring, we wouldn't be here. But we are. And I, for one, am not looking back. My life is mine again. and I intend to live it, completely and utterly unapologetically.